Well, I'm back here. I've been away for 2 weeks meditating in a monastery, and I've returned to the omnishambles that was going on when I first departed a fortnight ago. We are into the second hour of my first Sunday service since my return. In a little while, we talk about the BBC. Emily Maitlis seems to think the BBC is full of Tories and that she was the victim of a Tory conspiracy. Yeah, right, Emily. Yeah, we'll be talking about that. Also, the space race. We're talking about going back to the moon 50 years after we went. Where the space race seems to have got us is returning to the moon. I know loads of experts are going to tell us, oh, it's fantastic, the advances we've been made. But from my point of view, from the layman's point of view, I think space travel has been a major disappointment. Half a century and all we're doing is going back to the moon. What happened to Star Trek? I'll be talking about that. Also, would you pay £380 for a pair of fashion socks? Designer label socks by Dior, full of holes. 380 quid. What is that, 160 quid a sock? Do you remember the fully destroyed trainers? They're about 1,000 quid. The Balencia thereby. And then, of course, there were Gucci's famous grass-stained jeans, yours for £1,000. People pay money for this stuff. I'll be talking to fashion expert Amber Graffland all about the strange world of shabby chic, and also Charlie Ray, former Sun Royal editor, will be joining me towards the end of the hour, in fact in about an hour, to talk about what's going on Planet Windsor. But before we get to any of that, let's talk about the climate emergency. It's a crisis. Apparently, the hosepipe ban, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, told us last week was a direct result, a direct consequence of what he called the climate crisis. It's a climate emergency. You know, we've got to do something right now. Well, do we? Is it down to us? Now, when you contradict this orthodoxy, you say, well, I'm not entirely convinced that we are in an emergency, and also I'm not convinced how much humanity is responsible for climate change. Climate changes, it always has done and it always will. No, only an idiot would deny that the climate changes. That's what happens to this planet. But the question is how much is it our fault? Is it humanity's fault? And when you question this, there was, the vast majority of scientists, they tell you, it's ridiculous. Nearly all scientists will tell you it's greenhouse gases, it's humanity, this is an emergency. Well, guess what? There's a thing called the World Climate Declaration, which has now been signed by more than 1,000 eminent scientists, experts in the field, who say there is no such thing. There is no such thing as a climate emergency, and humanity's contribution to climate change is pretty negligible. An interesting divergence from what we're all supposed to think. Let's talk to the environment editor at the Daily Sceptic. Daily Sceptic, of course, Toby Young's daily publication online, in which he challenges some of the orthodoxies we're all supposed to accept, and a very good read it is as well. So a warm welcome to the environment editor of the Daily Sceptic, Chris Morrison. Hello, Chris.
Yeah, hello there, Kevin. I'm delighted to be here to join you and your viewers and listeners. And we can sort out this climate breakdown.
Yeah, you heard what I just said. You know, the universal response when you say, I've always said, look, the climate changes. Of course it changes. It always has done, and it always will. As to how much humanity is responsible, I'm not convinced, and I'm also not convinced that this is, quotes, an emergency. And every time you say that, Chris, you are shouted down. Oh, well, you'll find that the vast majority of scientists, you're flying in the face of scientific evidence. Well, now we have the World Climate Declaration. More than 1,000 eminent scientists are backing up what I said, that there is no emergency, and humanity's contribution to whatever problems we may be experiencing is reasonably negligible. Interesting.
Very interesting. And in fact, it's been criticised, of course, because they say, well, who are these people, going to sort of two big universities like Harvard and MIT? And it's led by a chap who won the Nobel Physics Prize, a Dutch professor. And there are almost 300 professors who signed this declaration. And as you say, they say that there is very little human involvement in the climate changing. Now, why do they say that? Because there's not really any proof that is so. The great big fib behind all of this ridiculous idea of settled science is that there is not a single science paper that proves conclusively that humans cause all almost global warming. There's not a single one, because it's almost impossible to prove. So they use climate models and they put in all of their information, and then they come out with this idea that, that there's all these things, CO2 is causing the warming. If you look in the paleoclimatic record and you go back 600 years, you will not see any link between the much higher levels of carbon dioxide that there were 600 million years ago. It's gradually run down to the current level, which is 400, which is the lowest really level it's ever been, dangerously low, some people might say. And the little increase we've had recently has greened up the Earth nicely. If you look at that link, there is no link between the temperature rising up and down. And if you look at the link in the historical record, you look in the ice records where they drill down in Antarctica, you'll see often that the temperature rises before carbon dioxide. And the reason is, of course, is that there are these huge natural variations that go over 20 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000, a million. You get all of these natural variations with the temperature rising very quickly sometimes, as it did from 1980 to about 1998. And you will see that there is very little link between any of these events and CO2 rising. So you have this idea that it can't be proved, and it doesn't show up in much of the historical and paleoclimatic record. And what we do with climate models, of course, is that in order to have all of these forecasts of Armageddon, they have to know what that figure is, that if you double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, what will the temperature rise? And again, they spent 50 years, scientists, and they don't know. They don't know. They estimate between 0.5 centigrade and about 6 centigrade. And so what they do with their climate models is they guess. So behind every climate model is this enormous guess. And so they put in garbage and they get garbage out. And they call it gospel, of course.
So what you're saying, Chris, is what the greenies, they're sort of catastrophists who say that what we're looking at here, when we get those very hot days we had a couple of weeks ago, 100 degrees, 43 degrees centigrade, that this is a situation that will get ever worse. But what you're saying is there's every chance we may be going through a hot phase now, and then it may well cool down again. There's no evidence that we are in an escalating heat crisis.
No, there's none. In fact, we're in a pause. If you look at the record, the global warming really ran out of steam from about 1998. And again, this is not, if you listen to the BBC or the ITV or Sky, it's carrying on. It isn't. If you look at the satellite record, which is probably the most accurate record we have, which takes countless measurements of the atmosphere and the near atmosphere or the near surface, and covers about 90% of the global surface, they show that there was a pause from 1998 to 2012. The temperature spiked slightly up to about 2016 under the influence of what appears to be a very, very powerful El Nino oscillation, which is a natural oscillation where the water warms from the Pacific. Since that time, there's been another 8-year pause. Temperatures have not risen for 8 years. If you look at sort of small records, you look at, say, the UK, it's not generally known. Again, you would not necessarily see it on the BBC. But the 2000s, the average temperature in this country was 9.31 centigrade. A decade in the 2010s, it was 9.17. It was cooler in the 10s than the noughties in the UK. Now, that's just one territory. It's replicated elsewhere. So what do they do in order to get these so-called record temperatures? Well, there are 3 main surface database temperatures. The Met Office runs one. It's called HADCRA, and it's run out of the University of East Anglia. And since 2013, they adjust, let's use a polite term, they adjust the figures. They've done it twice. They had HADCRA 3, went to HADCRA 4, went to HADCRA 5. And that adjustment added 30% warming to recent period. Not only did it add warming to that period, which wasn't replicated by the satellites and indeed meteorological balloons. They've cooled the recent past so that the spike looks even higher. So if you look at the HADCRUP-5, the latest surface database, which everybody quotes for temperature, you will see there is no pause. There is no pause. It sort of goes up like that rather nicely.
Chris, can I let me ask, all of this, why are they doing this? Why are they catastrophing this? What's behind all of this?
Yeah, that's the one question I always sort of say is almost above my pay grade. I sort of almost sort of shy away from answering. I think because there are so many reasons why it's happened. First of all, I think that on one level, the Judeo-Christian religion that was followed in the West for 2,000 years has declined. It's certainly declined in Europe and many parts of America. And I think that people want to follow something. So there has been this emergence almost of a pagan Gaia.
A new religion. Can I just, just running out of time, sorry to keep interrupting you. It's fascinating stuff. In your brilliant article the other day in the Daily Skeptic, it seemed to me that an increasing number of scientists who know what they're talking about are getting very angry about this orthodoxy, the catastrophe we all face, the emergency we're going through. Unless we do something now, humanity is doomed. And they're signing this document, the World Climate Declaration, and they're saying this just is not true.
No. And there was another one that we also mentioned. That was an Italian one, Professor Zucchici, who invented nuclear antimatter. So obviously he doesn't know what he's talking about in physics. And he was the president of the World Federation of Scientists, I think, or something like that. And he led a delegation of 43 actual scientists, like people who study physics, chemistry. And they said more or less the same thing about 3 years ago to the Italian government. So there is a lot of anger in academia. Professor Lindzen, Richard Lindzen from MIT, said that the climate narrative, he said, it's absurd. What's going on is basically absurd, all this climate emergency nonsense. He said, but trillions of dollars to grant-dependent academics and agenda-driven journalists, he says it's not absurd. And that is what it's about. There's a huge amount, there is a tsunami of money chasing all of this green propaganda. We have industrialization, all the subsidies for green energy. Everything is dependent on subsidy. The academics need subsidies, everybody. And there is this huge effort made to scare us all the living daylights out of us, because a lot of people are making a lot of money out of it.
And to add to that, there are the, shall we say, less well-informed kind of green zealots. I've had a few of them on my show who appear to me to be little more than a kind of doomsday cult. I had somebody on the other week from, what was it, Extinction Rebellion, sort of absolutely abrogating me, going, how dare you sit there and say enjoy the nice weather? How can you say that? I said, well, because it's a nice day, why don't you enjoy it? These are medieval doomsday cultists, aren't they?
And if you look at historical photographs and pictures, you will see the same, that pinched face that you see, that certitude.
Yeah, that's it, certitude, yeah.
You'll see it in the Red Guard, under their sort of cap. You'll see it in the Puritans with their pointed hats. You'll see it throughout history. And of course, every new religion needs certitude. In order for a religion, a cult, to escape from every other cult, it needs to be more certain. It has to be the absolute truth, the infallibility. It's all going on at the moment. So these are the reasons.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this guy I had on the other day, I've got to go now, Chris. It's been great talking to you, by the way. This guy I had on, I just said, look, listen, my view, I say, is open to doubt. I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but you are. And that's what they are full of. They are imbued with this sense of their own rightness, and therein lies half of the problem. Brilliant discussion. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. Chris